Hello fellow data friends. The way your barracks employ soldiers is broken, at least since 1.6.2. Actually, all buildings have this problem with employment, but it is especially bad for barracks. Let's have a look at this barrack in Normandy. It can employ up to 80,000 people and has about 35,000 vacancies. It is hiring 40 officers. It has a training rate of 1,250 and the reinforcement for 80 units is 40 soldiers. There are 25,000 qualifications for officers and everyone can become a serviceman. Let me put down social mobility, enlistment efforts, and high military wages. And again, 40 officers. Let me explain why and how Barracks could fix it. Any building can employ up to 10% of its total workforce per week. So this glassworks can hire up to 1,000 people per week if there are 1,000 willing workers and the building would still be profitable. Let's subsidize the building and observe what happens. That are about 200 new employees. About 300. About 400. 500. 600. You can see the pattern. This is because there's a weekly hiring range for buildings. Say a building wants to hire 10% of its total workforce, but can't. Then it will try 9%, then 8%, then 7%, until it will either try to hire 1% repeatedly, or it successfully hired some people and will try to hire even more next week. It's a decent mechanic to make sure that buildings, and especially large buildings, can still hire workers even if 10% would be too much. There's a small catch to this rule. A building can hire up to 10% of its workforce, but these 10% are limited to pop types. So these barracks could, at most, hire 400 officers, 10%, and 7,600 servicemen, again 10%. The training rate of a barrack is just an artificial barrier applied at the end, so armies cannot retrain 10% of its soldiers per week. There's a second rule for hiring employees. The employment proportionality limit, which is 10%. This means that the difference between pop types is not allowed to be higher than 10%. Say, this glassworks factory could not hire any more machinists due to missing qualifications. It has 58% of all machinists hired, so the building would employ 68% of all laborers and shopkeepers and stop. Which makes sense. Having full laborers without any machinists would be weird if that factory could work at almost full capacity. But the combination of both rules breaks barracks. To understand why, let's look closely at this barracks building while the armies fight. Only the officers take damage. I think Barracks just randomly assigns dying soldiers to one pop type, and in this case, it's the officers. So the building retrains officers. These are 360 officers in total. 320. 280, 240, 200, until it will only employ 40 officers per week. Let's have a look at the workforce ratios again. Officers are about 30% workforce, and servicemen are about 70% workforce. That's more than a 10% difference, so the barracks are not allowed to recruit any servicemen. That is why the building was recruiting less and less officers. The building could not hire its desired amount of people per week, thus it reduced the hiring target. But it's still not allowed to hire any servicemen, only officers. Thus, it further reduced its hiring target, until it reached rock bottom. This will only change once the employment ratio for servicemen is within 10% of the employment ratios for officers. Now it's close, and we see that the building is allowed to hire servicemen again. But now it's only hiring servicemen and no officers anymore because it has a lower percentage of servicemen. Increasing the training rate would not help because the training rate just acts as an upper limit, an artificial slowdown of employment. And by the way, the bonus training rate is shown in the modifiers tab, which also means any bonus to training rate will work inconsistently because the hiring process is broken. In conclusion, both hiring rules make sense and work nicely individually, but their interaction is broken. There's no need to hire less officers when the proportionality limit is blocking the employment target. And it's made a lot worse because casualties are not always distributed equally between officers and servicemen. It's not a missing qualifications issue. This is version 1.6 and you can see the same effect here. This barracks building is hiring 2 officers because the employment ratios are off. It's the same for Burgundy. So it's time for another bug report, which I will link in the video description. And a lot of thanks to Sulfi for supporting my channel as Data Capitalist. The support is deeply appreciated. Thanks a lot for watching and I see you on the next video.